This is the second part of a two-part series on understanding and responding effectively to student stress. This part 2 really hones in on responding effectively to student stress. Specifically, we're going to talk about a little background, a review of the part 1 core elements of understanding and identifying stress. And then we're really going to focus on the strategies for stress management, and then classroom applications and concluding comments about how important it is to respond effectively to stress in our students. So, a brief background review of part 1, core concepts. First, stress is an internal experience that we have when we perceive the demands of the situation are greater than we can cope with. So as much as a student thinks an exam is stressful, the stress is within themselves in terms of how they interpret the situation. Second, stress can manifest itself in multiple ways, and students experience it far beyond just emotional experience of stress. Third, stress levels vary along a continuum, and this affects performance. Our goal in effective response to student stress is to keep them in the optimal range of optimal stress for optimal performance. Furthermore, we tend to think that the time to intervene with stress with students is really during the experience of the stress, but in fact, it's important to use strategies before, during, and after the actual feeling of stress is experienced. So what are the strategies to intervene? Well, there are many strategies out there, as you are likely aware, and you may well have Googled or looked for them for either yourself or your students multiple times. So why am I choosing these strategies? I'm choosing these strategies because I know from working in schools for over 25 years that certain strategies work well in the classroom. Certain strategies are very accessible to adolescents. These are the strategies that adolescents like, adolescents respond to and use, and we personally, my team, has found them effective, and they have a lot of evidence behind them. So what are these strategies? Well, it's really a toolkit. We don't want one strategy. We want multiple strategies because we need to intervene before, during, after, and we need to intervene both physiologically and emotionally and cognitively, as well as behavioral choices that students make. So these strategies will address that multitude of aspects. Stop thought challenge, progressive muscle relaxation, breathing, mindfulness, and self-care. So let's start with the stop thought challenge. This technique comes from cognitive behavior therapy. It's a core aspect of that. Students who are highly stressed tend to be very self-critical. They have a lot of negative, repetitive thoughts. Things like, I am so stupid, why can't I get this right? What's wrong with me? Well, the stop thought challenge, the way it works, is that we teach the student, step 1, when you have that thought, notice you're having that thought. And imagine a flashing stop sign, stop. No, stop. Does that mean stop the thought? No, it means stop. Take a deep breath. Breathe in, and then, with that breath, challenge that. Really say to yourself, is that accurate? And challenge and question the facts about that statement, negative thought in your head, as if you were your own best friend. We're often hardest on ourselves, and a friend, if we said the same thing to them, they would tell us a much kinder perspective, because thoughts are thoughts. They are not facts, they are not truth. And this is something our students need to learn. The second strategy is really something easier. It's called progressive muscle relaxation. Some of you may already be very familiar with this. This is a great technique because it physically turns off the stress response, and there are no cognitive requirements. The student does not have to believe in it. They don't have to think it's going to work, and they don't have to be thinking clearly to do it. It can be done anywhere. Now, the example I'm going to give you is going to show a visual of how you can do it. But in fact, you can do this anywhere. It basically involves tensing and then relaxing each muscle group in the body, while as you tense and relax, noticing the feeling in your muscles. So here we have sitting on a chair, scrunching up your face and then relaxing. But we want our students to be able to do it anywhere. So they do not have to use their face in this at all. You can limit it to anything from below the neck. So I can do something like tighten my fists as hard as I can. And no one has to see I'm doing that. It's during or before an exam. I tighten, hold, notice the feeling in my fists, and then I relax, and I feel the different feeling in my hands. Tense my arms, feel, relax, and feel the feeling. You move through your legs, tighten, hold, feel, relax. If a student does this, it is a calming effect, and they can do it a multitude of times while they're sitting in that exam, and it will calm down the stress response. The second strategy that is similar to progressive muscle relaxation, because it's not a cognitive demanding aspect, is something that when we ask adolescents, what have you been told to do to handle your stress? What they say is, I've been told to take a deep breath. That's an excellent piece of advice, but sadly we don't all know how to take a deep breath. So when you feel your breath, even now listening to me, are you aware of where your breath is going? Can you see? Is it in the upper chest? Is it lower down, more in the belly? The goal for stress management is to have as much belly or diaphragmatic breathing as we can, but many young people don't know how to do this. So I'm going to walk you through a specific way of doing this when a student is upset, or routine calming. It's called the calming breath. And you'll see in the process of doing that how you learn to do belly breathing. This calming breath has a few steps. Here in the visual that I'm showing you, you can see we have a person lying down, but in fact you can absolutely do it sitting in a chair in a classroom. The key is you put your hand over, right hand goes over the heart, the left hand goes over the belly below the navel or belly button. And then what you do is you tell the student, notice where the breath is. Is it in the chest? Is the chest, heart, hand rising? Is the belly hand rising? That makes you aware of where your breath is. But for a calming breath, when we want the student to have the calming breath, we say, okay, I want you to inhale to your belly hand. Make that hand go up with your inhalation while keeping your heart hand still. This forces the individual to breathe in to the belly or diaphragmatic breathing. Then as they get better at this, you can teach them how to do into the belly hand, then fill it up to the top with a little chest or heart breathing, and then down from the chest, down through the belly. But to truly get the calming effect of this technique, it's essential that you do it to a certain pace. So you need to inhale to the belly, where you're going 4 slow counts through the nose. So you inhale through the nose to 4, and then you exhale for 6 slow counts. This gift that is available at the end with our resources helps students to see the pace of their breathing in and a longer breath out. Key points for this is the breath out must be longer. Ideally, as they get better, you get them to notice the pause between the inhale, pause, outhale, pause. This is very effective at calming the stress response. Our next group of strategies are mindfulness. which many of you I'm sure have heard about. But the mindfulness I'm talking about today is really a secular mindfulness drawn from John Kabat-Zinn's work on mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is what I'm trained in. And this really is separate from the Buddhist traditions that mindfulness arose from, although you'll certainly see a lot of commonality with that. The first piece of mindfulness is the awareness of the present moment. This is really being aware of what you're experiencing in this moment, coming to your senses or noticing your thoughts. The second part is doing that on purpose, which means that as my awareness or attention wanders, as it will, I bring it back on purpose again and again and again. But most important is the third part, acceptance of the present moment experience, without judgment or harshness, but with gentleness, so that when we're doing these strategies that I'm going to tell you about, it's important that when your mind wanders and you're trying to bring it back to what we're focusing on, whether it's the breath or the sound, that you don't beat yourself up about that, you don't criticize yourself, and you don't judge. I don't like that feeling. You just notice what is happening and accept it. This is critical with students who are highly stressed because, as I said earlier, they tend to be quite self-critical, and sometimes a mindfulness exercise that is to be calming and give them some lowering of emotion regulation difficulties actually leads to them thinking, I'm doing it wrong, why can't I do this, what's wrong with me? We need to really make it clear that acceptance and gentleness is key. But is mindfulness effective for highly stressed students? Well, in fact, mindfulness has been used in a number of high-stress, demanding professions to enhance performance and ability to function under stress. What kind of high-stress professions has there actually been use of mindfulness? Well, the U.S. Army used and has researched the effectiveness of mindfulness for their soldiers trained to serve in Iraq in combat situations to help them think clearly under these very stressful situations. Medical residents, in terms of being able to think clearly under highly stressful situations, have been trained to use mindfulness. First responders, similarly, and CEOs and Fortune 500 leaders in order to be able to lead even in high-stress situations. So yes, it's very effective in managing stress and anxiety when under tremendous duress. Here in Hong Kong, mindfulness has arisen as a way to treat student and teacher stress and stress in the population. Secular mindfulness. We see that you're seeing it across the board for teachers and specifically for students, although it's extremely expensive and generally done in the community. So can we use it in our classroom? If our students can't take the time or have the resources to access this outside? Yes, absolutely. Here, I'm going to be giving you some strategies and describing them briefly, but there will be a downloadable PDF resource and links to relevant video examples at the end of this video. So, the strategies for use in the classroom that we have incorporated effectively into the classroom and really change student stress fall into two groups. One is mindful moments. Mindful moments are brief, momentary, 30 seconds, 2 minutes max, but really just a few seconds, where we ask the students to become aware of physical sensations, sounds, or some other coming to their senses, coming into this moment. So I might say to you now, let's just take a second and become aware of the feeling of the floor underneath your feet. Become aware of the feeling of the seat underneath you, of perhaps the chair back against your back. These momentary drop into the moments, momentary, mindful, few seconds, done frequently through the day, lower the stress response, increase emotion regulation. and they're very easy to incorporate despite an incredibly demanding curriculum. Mindful practice is a more formal or structured, guided practice. It really should be very short if students are not familiar with it, 3 minutes. It can ultimately go up to 12 to 15 minutes, but really starting small is important. Emphasizing that when they're doing this, to do it without judging or labeling what they're doing, so not criticizing themselves. This really ideally is planned into the school day, 1 per day. If one can do 2, that's even better, but you vary what they are because different students prefer different types of mindfulness practices. So the body scan, which is really becoming aware of the feeling in your body part by part. So you move through your body like the progressive muscle relaxation, but in this situation, the student is just noticing what is happening, the feeling in, let's say, your hands. What is the feeling in your hands right now? Not trying to change it, not tensing, not trying to relax, just noticing the sensation you have in your hands. And then moving to noticing your forearms, the heat, the cold, the skin, and you move through the body this way. And this is very effective in terms of making students aware of what they're feeling in their body, because sometimes we rush through our day or our life living very much in our head without an awareness of what we're feeling moment by moment in our body. Sitting meditation, which is the more traditional meditation we think of, where you're observing breath, sensations, physical sensations, possibly watching or observing emotions and thoughts, in turn, just noticing and observing without trying to change, and with gentleness and judgment. It really expands awareness and it improves attention, because every time your mind wanders, you bring it back gently to what you're focusing on and observing. And this really builds the muscle of attention. And it helps students understand that thoughts are just thoughts that come and go like any other event within yourself of your experience. So then there's mindful movement. And this is really about focusing attention on your body and noticing the feeling of the movement, not trying to change anything or relax, but just noticing what's happening. So you can have the students sitting in their chair. If you think of it as like chair yoga, but it's not really yoga because we're not yoga instructors. So it's just sitting in the chair and having the students do things like raise their arms up high and feeling that sensation, and then down and noticing the feeling. Noticing the feeling as they move their shoulders back, and maybe even having them stand beside their desk and walk in place and feel the contact with the ground and the movement of their legs. This is really an excellent way to develop a sense of body awareness and grounding in the present moment by coming into your body with movement, which is very helpful. Breath awareness, if we go back how essential breath is, but this is really noticing the breath. You're not trying to control it, you're just noticing what your breath is doing, which is different from our earlier breath. And Yoga Nidra is really something your students can download on their phone and have available, which is basically walking you through the different parts of your body in sequence to relax the body in preparation for a deep relaxation prior to sleep. So then our next group of strategies are self-care and better choices. The important point here, we do tell our students this a lot, and we do talk to them about self-care and better choices, eating well, exercising, etc. What's unique about what I want to emphasize to you is generally students think of it as when the stress increases, so exam period, this is when, you know what, forget about doing my exercise, forget about eating well, I have to drink more coffee, I can't eat well. In fact, we should go about it the opposite way. Really tell your students to think of coming into that stressful period as in training. That's the one time they have to eat well, the one time they have to try to prioritize the exercise, because that's the time where they need that extra self-care. So you can't tell an adolescent every day to be healthy, eat well, and exercise. But for training, for high periods, yes, we definitely can. The classroom applications of this, when you can actually put this into place, in arrival time you can do, ideally, a formal mindfulness practice. And then you can, during transitions, really train the students to know that when the light goes on or off, they have a momentary mindful moment. But throughout the day, you want these mindful moments, just a few seconds. And then to settle a class, if you're having some upset in the class and you want to settle them down, that's where you want to use the breath awareness or progressive muscle relaxation to ground them in that calm moment. And then at the end of the day, ideally, you want another mindfulness practice. But finally, the specific situations of preparing for an exam, you want the self-care training. You want to have a regular mindfulness practice already in place because that will lower their stress response and improve their emotion regulation by decreasing reactivity, intensity, and increasing recovery. Also, encouraging the stop thought challenge if they're having very catastrophizing thoughts about the exam. In terms of right before an exam in your classroom, progressive muscle relaxation, calming breath, or a mindfulness practice. After an exam, that's very difficult. They've held tense the whole time. Mindful movement can really transition out of that difficult assignment or exam. When a student is self-critical, model and talk them through the stop thought challenge. And if a student is in distress, progressive muscle relaxation and calming breath. So in conclusion, we really need to incorporate stress management into the classroom, but we, as educators, need to model good stress management. We have to use these strategies ourselves because stress is contagious, and if you, as the educator, is stressed, that also has effect directly on your students. So use them and model. Be aware that the stress response can vary in intensity, and when it's interfering with daily functioning, referral is needed. And finally, remember that stress can be deadly, but you can help change that in your classroom.